Right, showtime, folks. Thank you so much for being up and early. My name is Sam, ASEAN Director of Impact Collective, and today we're with the cross-border launch box. We're going to try to figure out cheesily how to tame the Komodo dragon. I hope there's more interesting animals in Indonesia. Such a wide
More
array.
interesting than the Komodo dragon? I'm not sure. You may want to, it's a pretty high bar.
I know, or some other mythical animal that's, not so cliche, but I think the Garuda, yes. We also have the Garuda in Thailand, though. But on that note, we've got three amazing friends and speaker of Impact Collective and dear friends who are just so embedded and such a powerhouse of a community leader, accelerator operator, entrepreneur, and really just been around not just for so long, but have been involved with so many entrepreneurs. So today, for the Impact Collective Network, I've asked Heidi, Nicole, and Faye to come and share a little bit about their personal, real, kind of off the cuff insights of really, this massive opportunity that we call Indonesia, but sometimes often misunderstood. Now, I'm going to ask all of them to give a little bit of an introduction, and we'll get started with some questions. As always, Impact Collective folks, please feel free to chime in the questions in chat, say hello, and really we're just going to keep this dialogue very casual. As you can see, Hadi is so casual, he's doing his chat in some coffee shop. I believe it's in Brunei. But without further ado, we'll start with the big sister of the co-working industry, the one and only Faye Wongso, CEO of Kumpul Co-working Space, as with many other titles. So go ahead, please tell us more about all the fun things that you're involved in at the moment.
Hi all, thanks Aim for having me. I wish we can do this offline because then it will be so much fun just to have coffee together. So I'm Faye and Aim mentioning about co-working. So I started a small co-working space back in Bali in 2015, and then around that time in Indonesia, the startup ecosystem, the co-working ecosystem was so premature, just like at early stage. It was so difficult to explain what is it that actually that we do. Even I think until today, my mom still don't really understand what I'm doing. so because of that, in early 2016, I think I started to get to know you Aim already back in 2015, when there was this CU Asia, the co-working on Conference Asia for the first time. And then I thought, okay, the players in Indonesia, we got a different struggle. So in 2016, we gathered, and then with the collective power, we formed Coworking Indonesia. So the National Association of Coworking Players in Indonesia. But then moving forward with Kumpul, we saw the industry that the coworking players were, they are a very, very effective ecosystem builders, because then we started to see cities with strong players. They actually move faster, like the innovation, the type of startups, the talent, the programs. So, but then the co-working spaces in smaller cities, so not in the capital, not in Jakarta, they struggle if it's only renting out spaces or becoming like a common workspace. So we thought that maybe we could help the development of the whole industry with the startup ecosystem, the co-working ecosystem, by injecting or becoming the engine of all the hubs or the co-working spaces with good quality programs for entrepreneurs. So that's what we've been doing now for the last couple of years. And I can talk more about the type of programs, but then normally it's about startup development, network, and to make sure that people in far out islands or in smaller cities, because Indonesia is such a big country, and we'll talk more about that than the Komodo dragons. And
Yeah, so Faye is underselling herself. If people say, if you're coming to Thailand, come and talk to me, Faye is the other person you need to meet and pay your respects to Indonesia, Bali, and then she will host you like a small prince or a princess. So talking of princesses, another dear friend or warrior shield maiden is Nicole Yap, and she managing director of Digitaraya, which is a really badass regional acceleration accelerator community program that's part of the Google Launchpad Accelerator and many other things. And now, of all places in the world, she's building the link between Indonesia and Canada.
Yeah, something
Launchpad?
like that. I
Something.
think I am that link right now since that's where I physically am. But yeah, so it's nice to meet everyone. My name's Nicole. I'm formerly managing director of Digitaraya. So yes, until about a month ago, I was the managing director of one of Indonesia's most active early stage startup accelerators, working with partners like Google for Startups, McKinsey and Company, and UBS, as well as Gojek. So we were established 2017, which is the same year that I landed in Indonesia from Canada, which is where I'm currently based, thanks to COVID, or no thanks to COVID, I guess. What can I say about Digitaraya? It's an amazing accelerator. We've worked with 100 plus startups over the last 3 years and have had 13 cohorts that have focused on different verticals covering FMCG to fintech to energy. We've also had a female founders badge called Simona, which was really great achievement for me personally and something I loved kind of seeing come to fruition. We're continuing to do amazing work. I recently decided to take a step back from my role, just kind of wanting to recalibrate, I guess, for myself personally. I'm really interested in social impact. And so when AIM asked me to do this panel, specifically knowing that the audience would be social enterprises, that was something I was really keen to get involved with. I have advised a few social enterprises in the past, including a healthcare focused startup in East Africa. So I'm definitely looking to learn more about the startups that are listening on this call, if I can be of any help. If you want to know more about kind of what it takes to move and start a company in Indonesia as someone who has never lived there before in your life, I can give you a couple of tips and tricks to make that happen. But yeah, just excited to be here and hopefully can provide some good insights for the people listening in.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think speaking of moving, that thought has crossed my mind a couple of times. Like, this hype, man. Should I just pack my bags and go?
Yes.
And I think Nicole.
That's the short answer. I mean, that's basically the panel.
Like believe in the hype, great. So another believer is Hadi. So Hadi is actually originally from Brunei, and he did pack his bags, moved straight to Jakarta, and had a ball of a time there. We had so much fun, and I think you're back in Brunei for the time being.
Yes, I am.
So tell us all about what you're working on, Hadi, because I can't seem to quite pin it. You're all everywhere and nowhere.
What an interesting way of putting it. Well, I do stuff across both Brunei and Indonesia. I'm actually helping Ibu Faye in Kumpul as well. We're expanding rapidly on our programs across Indonesia. So I will leave the Kumpul part today, just for today, specifically to Ibu Faye. My first move to Indonesia was, of course, with Ibu Nicole as well. Oh yes, I'm the only one who calls both of them Ibu. Ibu is for the rest of the year. Ibu means madam, right? So it's just a habit that I picked up back in the day, okay, I lost track, which is normal. For Hadi.
It's
Yes.
pretty much part of the course.
Well, Hadi's an ex-Googler, and that's how we met each other.
Yes, 2012, I think.
So
when you were in that house in
Ekamai.
Ekamai.
So he's been around so long that you just don't realize that he's such a rock in the ecosystem. And speaking of which, now that we are on this boat to, the promised land, which is Indonesia, I'll start with this fun question. If you had to like reconsider, like Nicole and Hadi, was it the right move to like set sail and said, I'm gonna drop everything in Canada and Brunei, and Indonesia is the right place to be? I wouldn't ask Faye because she's obviously like, yeah, no shit. But what thoughts? Like really, seriously, was it the right call?
You want to go first, Hattie, or you want me to take the first
Ladies
stab?
first. Ladies first.
Ooh, princesses first. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, the long and short of it is anytime you're thinking about exploring a new market, and we know that Indonesia is one of the biggest, especially in Southeast Asia, that there's nothing short of going there and figuring it out yourself. There's just so much to be learned about Indonesia as a country, as a people, as a market, right? 280 million people, I think we're at now. And it's such a diverse market that even for me personally, being there for 3 years and only spending most of my time in Jakarta was such a limiting view, I would say. But even that, being in Jakarta alone and being able to meet people and spend time with people, it was such a huge learning experience. And I definitely don't think I would be in a position to say the things and know the things that I know now if I hadn't kind of picked up and made the decision to move there 3 years ago. That being said, I think for me personally, like the benefit I had of moving there is that my family is also from Indonesia originally. So kind of the frame of reference is that my parents are from Indonesia, but moved to Canada, which is why I was born and raised here. And so I definitely had the benefit of having a family there, having people that could help me get settled. And so, those are the kinds of things where if you can have a network or, a group of people who can already help you to get settled and connect you to the people that you need to know, then it will make your transition a lot smoother. But again, I don't think there's any substitute for being on the ground. So if you are considering expanding, the only thing I can tell you is you got to go there. You got to spend some time there. You got to meet the people. You got to talk to people like Hadi and Faye, because they know what's going on, and they can help you figure out where you need to be placed in the market as well.
Yeah. So on that note, Hadi, I don't think
Nothing.
you have relatives in Indonesia, but you
No.
definitely had to like readjust to life. Like you just packed your bags.
But Hadi, you have us. You're like your family.
Yeah, but that happened after, right?
Adopted.
Did you
Adopted
find it hard
family, proxy
land?
family.
I mean, now that you have family, it's great. But before that,
Yeah, it was a little bit of a risk. I think, I literally did. I actually only moved there with a suitcase, and that's how it started. So I'm coming from the smallest market in Southeast Asia, right, in Brunei. Yeah, so we're like a tiny country with which I always joke like all the population can disappear into one of Jakarta's districts or even Bangkok's districts, and nobody would notice, and yet there's only about 100 or so people like me who leave the country to like just do stuff outside. And I guess it's not as big as a risk as it sounds, but one of the reasons that I moved there was like the potential for growth was amazing. So no matter what you're doing, whether you're starting a new business, expanding into a new market, or even in this case at the time joining an accelerator, I think you should just make the jump. You don't even have to wait for a family to pick you up.
I totally agree. I totally agree, and I keep going back like and hopes. What do most people get wrong about coming to Indonesia?
Indonesia got all of this, like the most, title. Like we are actually the biggest archipelago in the world. We are the biggest Muslim population in the world. It's not in the Middle East, it's us. And also a democracy. And we are actually number 4, population wise in the world. So after the big ones, like China, India, the States, like the USA, it's actually Indonesia. But then on the global map, we are actually not well known at all. I think people know more about Thailand or even Vietnam, or Malaysia, than Indonesia, actually. So that's actually one of the reasons why I think we are doing what we are doing now, like even like Nicole, Hadi. So, I mean, I always call, like, when you become local community, when you put your heart, your work, your energy where you are, right? So basically, Nicole and Hadi are basically like local community for us. And then we see like so much potential because it's so diverse. It's literally like tens of countries into one. So the opportunity, and that can be like a two-way swords, right? I mean, like if something is so like everything is the same, one business model can tackle everything, but then the opportunity is also quite limited. So this is the misconception of Indonesia, is also because people don't know so much about it, that it becomes like a jungle, and people are so scared to enter if they don't know anyone. So like exactly like your question, Aim, like you asked Hadi, like, oh, how come you're brave enough to go if you don't have your relatives, But the thing is, I think the gap in Indonesia is also so big. So because we have 17,000 islands. And so when we say something about Jakarta, other parts of Indonesia is totally, totally different, right? And the Jakarta itself, but sometimes people think of Indonesia like all of this jungle in Kalimantan with orangutan and all like Bali exotic, the beach or Flores, because maybe that's what our government promote for tourism. But then Jakarta itself, I lived abroad too. So in a sense, like for me to decide to live and settle down in Indonesia is probably the same, almost not really the same, but there's like certain aspect like what Nicole had in mind too, I worked for other countries and then thought, why don't I do this for Indonesia? Because I actually have my roots there. I was in Pakistan one time, and then I was working and living in Kashmir, so in the mountain. So every six weeks we got an opportunity to spend a weekend in Islamabad, in the capital. I got so excited, and I wanted to go to the big malls, like doing to the nice spa and all that, right? And then they go like, yeah, Islamabad got everything. But then they took me to the biggest mall, but then like, I'm sorry to say, like it's nothing compared to Senayan City or Grand Indonesia, And then I just feel like, like people don't realize how developed we are, like how modern we are. Like you can just like come to Jakarta and people can actually like pick you up in a nice car, speaking English. You have warm water, like hot water, aircon, it's not a jungle. But, like talking to like people who really, really don't know about Indonesia, they really think we are actually not that developed. I think that's like the biggest misconception. And even for our Australian friends, I know that Wendy ran accelerator in Australia before, you mentioned.
Yeah.
Australian, I think when I talk to them, because I had my master degree in Australia, right? So then I have a lot of Australian friends. Either they go local because it's a safe market, like you have like 2-3 loyal customers, you can sustain yourself for life. probably. They pay good. They're good customers, you know. They understand your value. They pay good, you know. And as soon as you want to go global, you want to go international, you take a look at Hong Kong or China, you know, and then they skip Indonesia. We are next door. And I think the misconception is also because of the bureaucracy of things that you don't understand. So
Yeah.
then it becomes scary.
I think that's one thing that's probably most often heard in Indonesia, and you see it in the media, which is like, oh, all these labor protests. And every time you talk to a founder in Indonesia, they always say like they have trouble hiring. There's just all these unicorns. They're just sucking up all the talent, and it's really hard to build a team. I guess, you know, as folks on the ground, you see, is there like room for a foreign player to actually, you know, hire really good people? Because you kind of need that, you know, strong country head or that anchor team to kind of get started, or it's not necessary, or maybe the founders themselves just need to show up and get the ball rolling. Any thoughts on that labor shortage?
I mean, I think on the question of whether it's possible to achieve unicorn status if you're a foreign company coming into Indonesia, like I think absolutely, with a lot of hard work and a lot of smarts about how you want to navigate the market, right? Like I think probably the most obvious comparison that people will make when they're thinking about this is the Grab versus Gojek kind of competition, right? I mean, obviously Gojek was able to hit unicorn status before they even left Indonesia, and they're like the darling child of the country, right? The founder is now the Minister of Education. So, you know, every Indonesian basically hails Gojek as the success story for Indonesia. But that doesn't mean that Grab hasn't been able to make a significant dent in the market, right? Like I know personally when I'm thinking about, you know, how do I want to get from point A to point B, or where do I want to order my next meal from? Yes, like maybe I have a default where I'll choose one app over the other, but I will always check both, right? Because they're always, you know, deals, there's always discounts, there's always something to try to grab market share. And Grab's giving Gojek a good run for its money. And so I definitely don't think that if you're a foreign startup, you should count yourself out from Indonesia. I think there's definitely room to play, but I think you need to be very, like I said, you need to be very smart about how you do it. You need to find a really good local partner. You need to be able to build that team. You need to really commit yourself to being there, being present, understanding the market, making the connections, and not just take for granted that you can import a model into the country and that it'll work. Because Indonesians are diverse, they're complicated, and they're becoming increasingly picky, I would say, in kind of the services that they choose. And they're becoming much more sophisticated as they realize that there's all this attention being put on them. And so, you know, you do need to put in the groundwork to be able to do it. But I think if you recognize the opportunity and you're solving a real challenge that Indonesians are really experiencing, and you can capture value that way, then there's definitely an opportunity still available. So don't count yourself out just yet.
Well spoken. Hadi, go ahead.
I think as a foreign startup entering Indonesia in terms of both industry and talent, for talent, it's definitely there in Indonesia. I think the biggest barrier, I suppose, is language. I mean, you obviously will meet 1% outliers like Ibu Faye, who can speak English very well. But of course, your 1% is 1% of 290 million, so that's not so bad after all. But in general, you'll need a lot of localization, not just culture, but language as well. And language is contextual, so you need a lot of customization, and knowledge from locals is very important. So finding yourself a good partner on the ground, finding yourself a trustworthy founding team is quite important in entering. That being said, talent-wise, you also have a lot of shortage. So for example, the president, I think this year, right, I mentioned like, oh, we need under 4 million entrepreneurs and we need another 9 million programmers. So that's number that's always there, and it also represents opportunity. So there's lots of opportunity in education um, and other fields. So for example, I think we always discuss this, Ibu Nicole and Faye, we always talk about like the, what do you call it, priority industries. So if you happen to be a startup that's in those industries, that's also good, because then there's a lot of opportunity being pushed for those industries. Health, for example, what more in today's COVID situation. We also have health, logistics, education, tourism. Domestic tourism is thriving in Indonesia, that's for sure, even though COVID is all over the place. So these are kind of things that we have to consider as well.
Interesting. If I anything to add, because
Just to follow up, I think it's very okay. In the case of, let's say, Godek and Grab before, right? It's very important to have the heads, or the people who lead, the team leader, who really understand the context. And then you can just and then that person is the one who will drive. So our experience is that when it's so top down, when it's like international, let's say you got the American founders, and then they want to enter Indonesia, and everything should be like the American way, and then they put the American expert on the ground, and then to have the standard and all that. Most of the time that doesn't really work unless you are really partnering with, so like external with a very strong organization, or the organization are willing to help you. For example, if Digitaraya is like, okay, we'll take you in, and then they are the one opening doors, whatever, then it's done. But otherwise, you should just hire the head first, who really understand the context. Then in terms of talent, it might not be as easy as like you put an advertisement and people answer, because I think it's also the land of like where the network is so strong. So looking at the Global Entrepreneurship Index, they measure like all these 13, 14 factors to determine the index of entrepreneurship of your country. So Indonesia is still quite low, if you want to compare it to USA, Singapore, and other countries. But then the two highest score for us is product innovation and networking. So we are very communal. So we trust a lot people by recommendation. And then you saw like my team and Nicole's team, right? And like all the feedback I got from all the the network of like Google for Startup and our like international counterparts, whenever they come across our team, everybody is so like, wow, you have amazing team, and they're so young, and they're so competent, and they're so like awesome. So our friend Jansen told us, I mean, like he told me one time, talents is just to either you buy them or you nurture them, right? So so it depends, and both have their own risk. So being a startup, or being like people who actually really like believe in the ecosystem building and talents, we don't really care so much about credentials like diploma. So we nurture a lot of young people actually, and then it proves that you can actually run on like massive things, with green talents that you nurture yourself. But you really have to know, like the head needs to know where to go.
awesome. And on that same note, we've got a question from Sherif, and also one that from me was like, every time you talk about Indonesia, well, the head needs to know where to go for talent, but does the head also need to know how to get air support, a buy-in from local and federal government, and have the connections to conglomerate partners when launching in Indonesia? Sometimes I hear, anecdotal stories of like, oh, you need to bring in like a general onto the board to, keep you guys out of trouble, and all these elders that need to protect you and help nurture you. Are those, is that real? What's the facts from the fiction?
Yes and no. In a sense, I think it's not so much about bringing someone important on the board. It's more about how your business model also benefiting Indonesia. So Indonesia is already very aware, and protective of being seen as a market only. Like we don't want to be a market, we want to be the player. So this is already the mindset that the government and also people like us try to instill, So let's say when like a big company or like international company or startup coming in and just want to take and then use us as a market, then you will face some blocks along the way, because then people start to be like a little bit like, hey, what are you doing, so are you paying tax enough here, are you using our talents, are you like giving back to the community, stuff like that, which I think it's fair, like every country is doing that anyway.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's about the business model.
Yeah, I hear you. So any difference of opinion, Nicole or Hadi, from an semi-outsider view? Like,
And I was like,
What do you mean
fully
semi-outsider?
I'm fully. How do you still consider yourself fully outsider, like physically? No. No, I mean, I think for the most part, I would agree with Faye. I think especially when you're hitting a point of scale, it's really important, like she said, to have alignment with the values of the right people. And so, when it comes to government, for example, right, like you want to make sure that you're showing that there's a benefit to the country, that you're, again, not just looking at it as a market, but actually something where you see that your business can actually help the country to grow overall. I think when you're just starting out, you're at like a smaller scale, you're kind of piloting and doing like your market research or maybe your MVP in Indonesia, like those connections may not be as relevant for the time being, because you don't need at that point like the big pushes, right? Like these relationships become important when you're like, I need a big push, I need an endorsement, I need an introduction to really get my company out there, to get my name out there, to really help move the company forward, right? But at that point, you should already have a really good sense of what your business is and what the value is that you're bringing to the country, so that when you're put in front of these people or when you're introduced to them, like the best is always, of course, through introduction. As Faye mentioned, it's a very kind of high context country. Relationships are super important. Introductions are super important. I would say introductions are to a certain extent more important than merit even. And that's a plus or minus. You can look at it either way, depending on where your background is from, right? If you're from the US, for example, you might look at that and be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. But if you're from a country where relationships matter, that's pretty normal. And so, you want to make sure that when you get in front of those people, you have a really strong value proposition that they can get behind. But again, I would say if you're in the early days, like find the local partner who believes in what you're doing, who wants to support you, who can kind of be that bridge to the local market. But don't worry so much about the kind of getting the big guns behind you until you hit a point where you're like, we really need this. We really want this project, or we really want this business to scale.
Yeah, and on that note, maybe thank you, Nicole, for sharing. Just to dig a little deeper on what you said, maybe Hadi can also chime in, which is there's something I noticed, which is to come in with like a mentality of not taking advantage of the market. That's quite sensitive to Indonesian, is to provide, to become a partner of the ecosystem and the entrepreneurs there. How can a foreign startup of the folks on this call position and communicate themselves in a way that would resonate and ingrain themselves in a positive light to local ecosystem and the local investors and potential partners, versus somebody who would come in and experience a big pushback where they would, people would may say pleasant things in person, it's all smiles and everything, but behind the scenes are like, no, we hate these guys and we wish them, the worst. How would a team be able to land well and be attuned to the local culture?
I think that's a really heavy kind of question. I think it happens not just in Indonesia, but every country you want to work in. That's not an Indonesian specific thing. I would say that happens to you whether you're going even into Singapore or Malaysia. I guess it's really you need to understand the culture first in general. Having a really good local friend is important. You know, like if I wanted to expand to Thailand, for example, I definitely need your advice and people like maybe Casper, um, old friend of ours, right? To like just talk and interestingly, I think that has been a problem because even though like even I'm just gonna give an example in I've seen in the past where like Thai startups and Indonesian startups merge. You know, that big e-commerce one in the past few years, and you know how after that it kind of got, it's nothing, there's no malice on anybody's part, it's just a clash of cultures, a clash of understanding of each other's language, you know, especially again back to English is not neither country's first language. so it's all those basic communication things that become a thing that you have to be worried about. I think being worried about whether people are sort of like fake upfront and trying to talk about this kind of issues that you're not sure if they're honest or being. I think that's not just Indonesia. I'm not defending their culture. I think it's no matter where you go, you have to apply the same principles as a founder, as a business person, and really trust your gut. If it feels wrong, then it's probably wrong.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. Sorry.
The fact that, I mean, we have this co-working industry. It's not that I'm championing co-working because I have, we started that, right? But now it's actually a lot easier. You can just come, you join a co-working. I mean, if you don't feel it fits you, just move to another one, Google it, whatever. And then until you find a place where you feel like they have the right kind of support system and connections that you like. I mean, it's a lot easier than, for example, 10 years ago, entering Indonesia, because even like we have 300 co-working spaces across like 45 cities and district in Indonesia. So it's not just in big cities now. So that's actually one way to directly integrate yourself in a local community, even though it's like a miniature, like an aquarium before entering the sea, try to find the way, to go to the sea. I think that's actually one of the way.
Awesome. So, that shameless plug right there. Definitely save me a spot in Kumpul. But I guess, is there any other tips of, we get the usuals, right? Like go get a boyfriend or girlfriend, like in Thailand, that's like, the number one pro tip. Or yeah, come to my co-working space, come to my events. Any like trick that you normally would tell a friend, best advice of like, this is how to really get into the Indonesian psyche and really understand the culture and embed yourself.
Besides getting to know us, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Something that's not, what we normally say.
Bit of a hard one.
Finally, a hard question for community leaders. It's such a pro.
I mean, I really do think it's about being open-minded, honestly. Like, I'll give you examples. So we've hosted interns for the last 2 or 3 years who have come from overseas, right? They're not Indonesian. Some of them are, and they're, they're being like educated in the US and they're coming home to spend the summer in Indonesia, but not all of them. Some of them are US born and bred and then want to get some international experience and thought it might be cool to come to Indonesia for a summer. And to be honest, the ones who I think have taken the most, who have really learned the most and have had the best experience are the ones who just come in with a completely open mind and are open to any experience, are open to trying new foods they've never heard of before, even if it's super spicy, and they get a stomach ache the next day or the next 3 days. And like, that's a real anecdote. I had an intern from the US 2 years ago who had never set foot outside of the US before. But because he came in with this mentality of like, I'm just going to do whatever, I'm going to go with it, I'm going to learn whatever I can, and I'm going to enjoy the time that I have here, he became the best intern we've ever had, bar none. Like, everyone on my team loved him. They loved how much effort he put in. They loved how much he wanted to learn, right? And because of that, they were more willing to teach him things, to introduce him to people. And he got a lot more out of it than another intern I know of, who that same summer came in and had her mind made up of what she was going to get out of that experience. She's like, I want A, B, C, D, E. And she came in and she was like, that's all I want. And when it became clear to her that she wasn't going to get that, she left, right? And so, I really do think that Indonesia, because it's such an unknown, people just need to come into it with a really open mind of, I'm going to learn what I'm going to learn. I'm going to try new things. I might fail. And in Indonesia, there's always more than one way to do something. So I will say that don't take your first failure as a sign that you're not meant to be in the market. There's 275 million people. There's more than one way to get something done in a country that big. So if the first person says no to you, doesn't mean anything. You just have to keep trying. But I think it's that resilience and that open-mindedness and really just like willingness to take in the culture and the people that is going to, one, help you succeed in the market, but two, is also adhere the people to you as well. I think when you show interest in the culture and put in the time and effort to build the relationships with the people, they'll recognize that and they'll reciprocate that, and they'll go out of their way to help you. So those are for me, those are the things that, at least for me in the last 3 years, have been the most critical for me to feel like Indonesia has been really, I guess, a place where I could see myself being for the long term.
So on that note, and Sharif has dropped a few interesting questions. Like, for you, Hadi and Nicole, besides being welcome and feeling a sense of settling in, I'm sure there was a lot of projects and opportunities, many startups that they would come to you for advice in terms of like, we really want to bring a lot of smart people and we want to get them on the team. We're trying to pull them from Gojek. Some people are trying to, give you many, many opportunities. And then in other markets, ESOP might have been a thing, right? Or is that the best way to bring amazing people on the team? Or is it just, a great story, a rocket ship that people can't afford to miss, or just really big pay? Like, how would we bring like the likes of you to join a grand adventure in Indonesia?
I'll let someone else answer first, and then I'll give my 2 cents.
Indonesia is an interesting place for this kind of shared discussions. A lot of Indonesian startups are actually incorporated in Singapore because, basically because of the very difficult and complex nature of the legal system. And to create a good construct for a compensation package in Indonesia, it's going to be because every time as a startup, you're not going to like pay a lot of money every single time you onboard a new team member, and then co-founders have weird expectations as well. Even though we're technically mature, I think, not super mature like US or Singapore, but mature in terms of like we have a number of unicorns, we have a number of C, D, E series startups. There's still millions of people who want to join startups without understanding like why am I not getting 50% as a co-founder? Why am I not getting 20%? Because hey, did you know that startup in US, you have their expectation versus reality is another thing you have to be watch out for. So I think comp packages and IDs for where Indonesia, where the founder or co-founder or whoever you're trying to onboard comes from a unicorn or senior startup, mature startup, it's easier because they would understand, okay, why do I get this percentage and that. But if you're onboarding just raw talent and they have no idea about a startup, maybe they have connections, maybe they're well connected to conglomerates and stuff, they may not give you a very ideal offering. That's my take on it. Second, administratively, it's like crazy trying to like arrange, as Nicole knows, how do you structure shareholding in startups in Indonesia. It's like we actually like hand it off to legal teams, which you have to pay thousands of dollars for every single time. And every time you want to change something, it's another few $1,000s, which as a startup, maybe not so way you can do it in Singapore. I'm not selling Singapore here, obviously. I don't know if you can do it in Thailand, but definitely you can. You have to think about the administrative structure of your startup, especially if you're quite in stage.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I think that's a whole new like can of worms, a big broad topic around structuring in Indonesia. So we'll take that definitely offline, but just to know that it's hard and most people land on the red dot to get things done. Now, we've got a question from Siu, and I think Faye, you can help shed some light into this. Same question to myself. Like a lot of teams, you know, we've got to deal with large government or large enterprise, right? So Siu is in I've got a startup for water remediation, for cleaning up oily wastewater. So oil spills, wastewater discharge, you know, what is like the Indonesia government stance to, you know, many of these impact related startups versus just like unicorns that we talk a lot about? And is the prospects, you know, bright or dim versus, you know, maybe other hot industries that are a more priority, like Hadi was saying, right? We need 4 million entrepreneurs, 9 million programmers. Is the focus less on impact, more on, you know, coding and you know, jobs or whatnot?
Again, if you want to have the buy-in from the government, which you maybe like what Nicole said, you know, in early stage, maybe you don't need to, you know, if you just want to explore, you want to talk to the players, maybe you don't directly need support from government. But then again, when we say government, who are the people? Because network is key in Indonesia. So for example, like looking at this question, I instantly know, for example, if we are the partner to onboard the startup to Indonesia, first thing we do probably just to, you know, get a sense what is it that you're doing, and then we know so many startups not exactly doing the same thing, but then maybe, you know, just to book a lot of meetings and to understand, oh, this one is doing that and that one is doing this. I mean, we can give an overview, but it's always good to have like a one-on-one feel, you know. And then actually there's like someone in the government pretty high up that's like looking at how can we utilize startups to take care of some spots, some like strategic spots, tourism spots or whatever, you know, for their environment, and you know, whether to like waste management and all that. But again, if you want to start onboarding government, you have to have the story, what's in it for them, I mean for us, what's in it for the talent, what's in it. So it's not just like a foreign startup with foreign names doing something, right? So again, that's not that's probably a little bit after we do the mapping and then meet the people. I mean, did that answer the question, or maybe I'm just like dating?
I think in that context, like just to add a little bit, which is what would CU need to do to get the buy-in of these big players? And maybe she starts small and, you know, nobody really worries about her, but maybe as she gets bigger, it can rub people the wrong way. It could, you know, people could be like, hey, why are you spotlighting all these wastewater problems? And, you know, there's a lot of ways things that start out nice and small can be misinterpreted, and how can she actually integrate herself into the ecosystem positively so that her business grows as the government may be a little bit more willing to have a foreign player come and solve a very Indonesian, or a very local problem.
To have the perspective of solving problems and giving solutions, and not to point fingers, this is what you did wrong, you're so bad, like, you have so much pollution, like bad Indonesia. I mean, nobody likes to be on the spot like that, right? I mean, any countries wouldn't like that, I think. But then we already have this mindset, because actually the startup ecosystem, almost all ministries are not now on board with the idea of innovation and startups and accelerating impact, also with technology. So I always say, like, problem is money. So if you have all of these problems, it's actually opportunity for business model for you to find solutions. So this is actually what we're doing, right? So if you choose that kind of angle, you have this, the numbers, but then we can turn this into gold through this, then people love gold. So just find your gold.
I like that. Or black gold, as you would say, black gold. Now, we've only got 3 minutes left, and Stephen from Kinesis is already joined us. So hello there.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Nicole, Faye. Hey, Sharon.
He should be on the panel.
Exactly. So he's going to talk
I think
about
he's
funding
the next
and
one.
Exactly. So as you can see, everybody is a friend and family here. But two last quick ones. So quick fire, like, what are the sunrise industries in Indonesia where there's a ton of potential, and the sunset ones where, like, if you're coming to the local market with this kind of startup, forget about it. And maybe it's startup, but also if you can think in terms of impact, because Bali, there's no shortage of people trying to do a beach cleanup or some river cleanup, and it's like, again, come on, ocean plastics, right? Or maybe there's still opportunity to solve that problem. So go, fire away, folks.
Oh, this is such a good question for Stephen. You definitely need to ask him what he thinks about this. But I'll give you my opinion. Sunrise industries, anything that's looking at base of the pyramid market. So you're looking at small, medium enterprises, micro enterprises. There are millions and millions of these types of folks around Indonesia who have not been penetrated by technology. And there's a handful of startups that are trying to do it now. And I'm sure Stephen can give you some really great examples of some really amazing folks who are bringing technology to these companies, but they represent a completely untapped market when it comes to technology. So whatever you can do to empower these micro enterprises, I think has a lot of support from the government, even, because I'm sure they're trying to do more. I would also argue education. I think especially with the installation of the new Minister of Education, Nadiem Makarim, who's the founder of Gojek, sets a new vision for kind of how they want to approach education in the country. And so having someone who comes from a tech background, who's the founder of, the first decacorn of the country, I think he brings with him the mindset that there's a huge opportunity for technology to play in creating more access, reliable access to quality education across the country. So I think that's going to be an interesting play as well. And I think, given COVID and all, anything related to healthcare, access to healthcare is going to be really interesting. I know there's already a lot of kind of big players. Halodoc, of course, comes to mind as one that's dominating right now, but that doesn't mean there's not room for disruption and opportunities for tech to, enable more people to get access to healthcare. So those are my sunrise. I'll let Faye and Hadi take their turns. In case they disagree with me, feel free.
Health, education, logistic, but then totally right with the SMEs. A lot of government, like we can take a look at it from the government's budget for next year. It's a lot in SMEs and digital literacy projects. So so I won't take too much time, because so Stephen can have his 2 cents.
Awesome. A good segue into Stephen. Hadi, Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess for me, I agree on the industries, but I think the perspective is velocity. So the faster you can deliver services in any of this industry, the better. And if you're not doing speed, then you're out. So the sunset is on industries that are not delivering on speed. So if you don't need it now, there's no urgency, then you're not doing anyone any favors. Don't worry, clean tech is always urgent because it's climate. So I think that's urgent. But any industry that's not delivering fast, bye. That's how I see the sunsets.
All right, folks. So last quick note, besides massive thank you, but for everybody in this call, after COVID, they all are going to pack their bags, go to Bali, go to Jakarta. Any pro tip or friendly advice? First thing to do when you land in Indonesia?
Go to Bali. No.
Go to Bali.
Contact Faye. Go to Kembali and go set up shop in Bali. No, I mean, well, nowadays I think that's not the worst plan, honestly. But yeah, I think it's just find your landing pad. Honestly, just find the people local who can support you, and it is going to be a shameless plug for Kumpul here because they have a huge network across the country. Wherever you want to land, they know somebody. So reach out to them, tell them you're coming. They'll find someone to host you. But yeah, just come with an open mind and be willing to eat some really spicy food. Be prepared for a lot of sambal.
Any last takers? Besides meeting you, Faye?
I think just enjoy the ride and don't have this coach mentality. I think being in Bali, exposed to a lot of foreigners, there are like certain areas in Bali that everybody wants to be a coach. I'm this coach and that coach, and I can teach you this, I can teach you that. And Indonesian are so friendly, and like you said, Abe, we will like smile, like, yeah, teach me. And after that, they basically like leave, So like Nicole said with the intern and all, like just enjoy the ride, learn from each other. I think it's going to be a fun ride because it's just a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah, and for me, I think just learn, enjoy, as in don't plan too much, and just make sure you try out the street food too.
And make sure you bring good medicine if you're gonna try the street food.
Awesome. I give the same advice in Bangkok. So hearing this chat, I can't wait to pack my bags and really go over there and kind of really be the last, I would say, the last big frontier emerging markets. It's with so much promise. Otherwise, after this, like Nicole was saying, we're gonna have to pack our bags and head to the Africa for the African decade, which is up and coming after Indonesia.
Did I say that?
Sort of. I got asked to consult in Ghana as well, so a little far out, but this is closer to home. This is where things are really happening, and as you can see, for folks on this call, this is a real market with true gems, true friends that can really make expanding there not just about making money and a great big business, really a fun ride. And then I've been blessed to have Nicole, Faye, and Hadi, and now Stephen in my life as friends. And I can't wait to get you all connected to expand your business with their help and support. And sometimes Faye's blessing, because she's almost like a shrine that you need to give alms and pay your respects to. But on that note, we're out of time. Stephen is ready to rock and roll. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nicole, Faye.
Thanks, Aim.
See you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Have fun, Stephen.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah. Talk again.